G'day everyone, I am the man called Kemosabe, the man with a plan from the land down under, and I've got a crowdfunding campaign currently active for my comic, The Company Men, Dead, White and Blue. Running a crowdfunding campaign is pretty stressful, at least the first time round, and it takes a fair bit of time. I haven't had the time to do a lot of comic book reviews lately, and I've developed quite a backlog. To try to catch up, I thought I'd do some flash reviews, shorter, bullet point looks at recently released indie books. If you like this sort of format, please let me know. Save the World is a creation of writer-artist Tonicmole. This book was the third in the series, but Tonic has created at least a half a dozen books before this one. Tonic writes and draws the book himself and has fulfilled on time across several platforms. Save the World is funded on both Kickstarter and Indiegogo platforms. I believe the book is funded initially on Kickstarter, then once fulfilled, brought over to Indiegogo to appeal to a different audience. It's a similar model to what Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini use on Carmen America. And for those creators not strictly adhering to the tenets of Comicsgate, they benefit from accessing both platforms for diversifying opportunities for funding. I've reviewed Save the World 1 and 2 quite favourably in previous videos. I'll link them below. Save the World is a story of Kiera, a well-endowed burger flipper and comic geek girl who vanishes from her life of obscurity and reappears naked with missing memories. She returns home and in her rage at being so vulnerable, discovers she has super strength that manifests as a kind of hulking up, adding sudden amounts of muscle mass to accommodate the feats of strength she performs. She's been seen strong enough to lift a car and survive explosions and grenades. The theme of the book seems to be focusing on the realities of a regular person gaining and trying to use their superpowers for good. As you'd expect in a world with so many shades of grey, it's not as easy as you'd think. Black and white comic book morality doesn't really exist. Things are always more complicated than we expect. Tonic has done a great job of making the scenarios seem mundane without being boring. Kiera has to deal with logistics and the fallout of her actions in a grounded, realistic way. In Book 2 she meets and befriends Nora, who is empowered in similar circumstances to Kiera, but has a kind of superintelligence power instead. After they successfully defeat a newly empowered supervillain who is essentially immortal, the girls seem to have developed a kind of partnership and rhythm, establishing a new normal, a new status quo that future stories and antagonists can bump up against to create conflict and therefore story. Which is why Save the World 3 is such an unusual offering. Tonally and pacing-wise, it is very different from the last two books. Whereas the last two books offered significant character development and building of the lore, reinforcing the normal of Tonicmole's Save the World universe, Book 3 is made up of two stories of similar length, but different art style and tone, essentially dividing the book in two. Neither story feels like a backup, but neither do any of them feel like the main story. While still in chronological order, the first story is such a departure from the previous issues, and even the story that immediately follows it, that it feels very out of place. The art is handled by Jim Lawson, and is a stark contrast to Tonic's own style. Tonic was very excited on Twitter to be working with Lawson, who gained acclaim from his work on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics. His style in this comic is hyper-cartoony, with elastic movement and proportions even into the realms of the surreal. Tonic's style tends to have shades of grey to enhance the dimensionality of the figures and give the scenes depth and weight. Lawson's style is stark black and white, retro underground comics with an X-type art, and frankly it sits markedly inferior to Tonic's style. The story, while written by Tonic himself, didn't appeal to me on the first read. I found myself wanting to skip the Weed and Speak and Daria-like 90s MTV banter. It appears that working with Lawson is a milestone for Tonic, professionally and personally. Lawson's involvement with the book feels like a vanity project to me. Those kind of things creators do to please themselves. And why not? It's their book. If Eric Larson wants to lie about the President of the United States and alienate half the country, who could stop him? If he wants to turn his book into a weird Tijuana Bible of Golden Age public domain characters and incest fetish porn, he can reap the whirlwind of sudden, temporary infamy and sharply plummeting sales immediately afterwards. I'm sure Tonic got a kick working with Lawson, but in my estimation the book is poorer for his involvement. In Save the World 3, the first half of the book details Kiera's inane misadventures while working at Burger World, the dialogue and jokes like something between South Park and the aforementioned Daria. After Kiera clocks off, her and Nora change into costumes to attend a costume party. Nora insists Kiera wear her crime-fighting outfit, and it's fortunate that she does because the party is besieged by a strange girl who vomits up Lovecraftian slug creatures that rapidly grow and attack the crowd. Kiera defeats the first slug creature, and the duo flush the second down the toilet before they subdue the mother of these monsters with a very mundane broom to the face. Kiera suffers a bunch of fan service wardrobe malfunctions along the way, and when she realises the crowd has seen the two of them acting super heroically, she tries the old weather balloon reflecting off swamp gas routine before Nora pulls a Robert Downey Jr. and admits they are superheroes to all and sundry. There was little character development and very little was added to the lore of the world Tonic is building here. There is an epilogue that shows the slug creature that was flushed growing into a kind of unicorn man, but honestly both of these stories feel like they could have been backups or part of a Save the World anthology. While combined they make a single, full-length story, the difference in tone, content and the jarring art styles mean they don't flow like one narrative, leaving you with a comic that feels like it's made up completely of backup stories. Tonic's art had only gotten better with each offering. The art on Save the World 3 is a huge step up from 1 and even 2. Tonic continues to grow as an artist and a writer. The art on Save the World 3 is refined, tight, deliberate, with lovely smooth grey tones and visceral emotive facial expressions. Save the World offers plenty of fan service and cheesecake. While it's not as explicit as issue 1, the title character is still a busty redhead who has trouble keeping her clothes on, by circumstance or by choice, and that's always a good thing. Lawson's art wasn't up to the standard Tonic set in previous books. The pupil has become the master and Tonic outshone his artistic hero in every regard in this comic. After months of waiting between books 2 and 3, admittedly not many months because Tonic works incredibly fast and always delivers on time, it was disappointing to get an issue that didn't really feel in continuity. Aside from the horse creature being some sort of reoccurring character in the near future, it feels like these stories could have occurred at nearly any time after Nora and Kiera become crime-fighting partners. Very little, if anything, was added to their character and very little new information was provided to the readers. Tonic has pulled out some great work in the past and I've opined about where the story might go, so I want to see if I'm right about these predictions. Save the World 4 is funding right now on Kickstarter and I will be backing that campaign to see what happens next, but I'll be holding out that Save the World 4 meets the quality set by issues 1 and 2. Next up is a review of the Expositioner from Ideal Comics. Story by Van M. Reese, pencils by Barry Tetz, inks by Taliesin Reese. If a cover is the most powerful tool you have to sell your book, Expositioner isn't doing itself any favours. The colours are flat, muddy. There are gaps between the colour and the line work that you get when you use the bucket fill tool on the line work layer instead of multiplying the line work layer and flattening the colours in the layer below. The cover looks like it was coloured in MS Paint. Having the character's feet line up with the bottom of the page make it look like he's walking on air instead of leaping, which I think was the actual intention. The opening page has a lot of dialogue and the layout makes it hard to follow, which is a shame because the actual dialogue is pretty good. Expositioner tells his ally Shock that a source of his told him of a plot to kill a woman and asks Shock to use biometrics to find the alleged killers. Shock says he'll do what he can and Expositioner leaves. He muses that for Shock to work at the Remus Corp regs must be difficult. He also reflects on how his source is someone called the Gamesman, and most people think he's been dead for 26 years. Expositioner visits the driver of the train or bus the threat was heard on. The driver directs Expositioner to the person doing the boasting, a guy nicknamed Johnny Trigger. Shock comes through with 2 names. Expositioner visits one of them, a guy named Woodsworth, to tell him Johnny Trigger is framing him. Woodsworth doesn't believe it until he searches for his gun and he realises Johnny Trigger took it to kill the girl because she is a witness to something Johnny did. Expositioner gets the girl's address and searches her place. She bought a ticket to leave town, so Expositioner heads to the bus depot, only to arrive a minute too late. The girl is already dead. Shock turns up and lets the Expositioner know the police caught Johnny fleeing the scene and found the gun he was witnessed ditching. It's a slam dunk. That's little consolation for Expositioner, who is torn up and not been able to save the girl. The story is actually pretty good. It doesn't have a happy ending. Expositioner is trying to save a life but doesn't make it in time. It's true to life, it frames human nature and subverts the expectation of the hero swooping in at the last minute to save the day. Expositioner seems to have some sort of stealth technology, which is cool. I'd like to have seen how he got or developed this tech and how he uses it in his work. I'd like to see more of this world and have some of the ideas and terms defined. What is the Remus Group? Who is the Gamesman? Why is Shock helping Expositioner? Why does Expositioner do what he does? Why be a hero at all? Who is he when the mask comes off? I've got to be honest, this art is just bad. There's not really anything constructive I can even say about this. Barry Tetz has a long way to go before his stuff is even amateur. It's hard to follow, minimal to no backgrounds, no transition, no shading. It's hard to look at. I would recommend Barry use the mirror trick, where artists look at their work reflected in a mirror to highlight weaknesses with composition and anatomy. Biometrics, dead superheroes, megacorp, stealth, camo tech. I feel like Van Reese is doing a good job of world building. These little tidbits hint at a bigger world. I feel like this book and this character could be more successful with a stronger artist. The story is solid. Expositioner is a more cerebral hero, one who does a lot of talking even though he seems physically capable. Leaping and flipping like a superhero, he doesn't actually engage in any violence or combat in this book. I'm getting vibes of The Spirit and even Steve Ditko's Mr. A, both heroes who don't always have to solve their problems with their fists. I'd make that the Expositioner's strength, the thing he's known for. The book is sold for $1 and it's 8 pages long. $1 for 8 pages is just about Big 2 prices, but it's not Big 2 quality. Double the money and pick up a 30+ page of anything else from Atomic Pulp Comics instead.